Emotions are contagious, and they have far more impact on all of our big, bold initiatives and goals and the work that we're trying to do than we give them credit. Hey, deep thinkers. Hey, audacious leaders. Welcome back to another episode of Unscripted, your weekly dose of unfiltered insights at the intersection of law, leadership, and learning. It's me, Nkoyo, lawyer, futurist, mom, sometimes politician, eager to help push you unscript your thinking and push the boundaries of what's possible. And today, we're going to talk about emotions in leadership. And I'm sure you're like, girl, why are we talking about this? What does this have to do with anything? But if you spend any amount of time looking at this Democratic National Convention that happened, if you are willingly or unwillingly following along with the presidential election that's happening and this sort of momentum boost that the Harris-Walz campaign has right now, that's why we're talking about emotions and the impact that they have in our work as leaders. And I want you to know and understand that emotions are not just personal experiences. These are powerful tools that can be used to drive leadership, shape movements, and influence culture. And literally, I was not present at the DNC. I know some people who were, but even just watching it on TV, I know people have talked a lot about the roll call. I live in Atlanta. I've been here for quite some time. So when Atlanta hit and Georgia hit and Little John came out and, it was like high energy, people were going wild. There was absolutely a piece of me that was like, a thing was done in this campaign that can't be undone. And I think that a lot of the commentary that's surrounding it echoes that. And a lot of what has been done is bringing joy and excitement and fun to politics, which is an area where we probably don't always necessarily think about joy and fun and culturally relevant and hip and cool. In a lot of ways, people don't get excited about policy, but like a lot of people are now reading the Mandate for Leadership, a 900-page policy document, and digging into that and asking questions about policy. And so as you exist leaders of organizations that are solving deep, enduring social problems that often seem maybe not exciting or sexy, there's absolutely something to learn and take away from the DNC and this moment that is happening in the political sphere that's, been happening. I'm in fairness, I think that 2016, Donald Trump coming down the escalator in a movement that also had a bit of energy, perhaps for very different reasons, also galvanized and got people to take action. And so we need to think about how emotions impact the work that we're doing. And so that's what we're going to dig in here today. You know me, I'm always going to talk about us and the need to lead audaciously, to stand out, to do things that are disruptive, because the status quo doesn't work for most of us. Point blank, period. I think even the polarization that we experience in the world right now shows that. But the fact that many of us are out here trying to figure out how to make the world a better place for ourselves, our kids, kids, let you know that the things that are going don't work, that the system as it is moving, in which we each participate, whether actively or not, needs some sort of disruptive forces to happen to actually shift the things. And, I'll talk to you all the time. Folks will always talk about the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I don't know, the speed at which it's bending towards justice is, glacial. And so I think we actually have to be really intentional about moving it towards justice, standing on it, stomping on it, pushing as a collective to make sure that we actually have access to a more just world where each of us have the opportunity to thrive. And me, I don't want you just to have the opportunity to thrive. I actually want you to be on the path to doing that. And that means we have to do some deep disruptive things. And that's just like what it is, which is why we talk a lot here about audacious leadership. And audacious leadership shows up in three kind of core areas. Culture, like what is the environment that you are building? How is it that your organization, you as a person, are consistently showing up? And, how culture, again, I think is something that plays not just in like what you tell people. It's not just like, oh, hey, this is our mission, vision, and our values, and it's cute, and it's on a a piece of paper somewhere. It's not like a credo that you laminated. Culture is how you make every single decision. It should be a part of absolutely every aspect of the work that you're doing. And if it's not, there's a misalignment that's happening there. And I think we have to go back to things like purpose, power, and professionalism to really make sure that we're building and designing the culture that we want. And I'll unpack that in some other spaces. We also talk about capacity, right? Like, you can't do big, bold, disruptive stuff by yourself. I used to believe that. I really spent a lot of time just like, I'm going to sheer grit and will my way towards solutions. There's the African proverb that's like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And when you're trying to do deep systemic change, disruptive change that's actually going to put us on a different trajectory, you can't do it alone. So we got to really think about like, who's on the team? What are we building? How are the people that we're building and collaborating, the coalitions that we're building? Like, how are we doing this? What is a part of this? And how is energy and emotional energy a tool that we can use to our benefit to help us galvanize greater support, greater interest around the things that we're doing? And then, you know me, I'm an attorney by training, so I'm always going to say, hey, there's some compliance pieces to being a big, bold leader. I used to say, our goal when I was practicing and running my firm was to push the law, right? We were always talking about leveraging the law. The laws are set up. They are not objective. That was the most heartbreaking thing, I think, of my first year in law school. Actually, maybe the whole sum total of my 3 years, is that nothing that happens in the law is apolitical. We like to tell people that it is. We like to assume that it is because we think that these laws come from somewhere, but they're like created by people who get enough other people together, talk to folks in positions of power in the legislative branch, which is where all of our laws, et cetera, are created. And then they become laws, and then they're tested. And that's where lawyers show up and we make arguments about what the law is or isn't and what it says and what it doesn't. And then they go to the court, and the court, the big court, the Supreme Court, which used to carry a lot of weight and credence and whatnot, they make these decisions. And I always remember my first year of law school sitting in civil procedure. Like, how do cases happen? How does any of this stuff happen? What is this whole process? And remembering my civil procedure professor talking about, Brown v. Board was a 5-4 decision. So if you're not familiar with Brown v. Board, that was the big education case that said separate but equal is inherently unequal and called for integration at all deliberate speed, which meant no speed because schools are equally, if not more, segregated today than they were at the time that Brown v. Board was decided. They're also deeply underfunded. Like, there's gross inequities that happen because of a lot of other cases that came after that, but that's another conversation. But essentially, I remember talking to him about this, and he was like, it's a 5-4 decision, right? You can get like unanimous, you can get like a 5-4, which basically means that if one person had switched, Brown v. Board wouldn't exist today. Which is wild because you think like, okay, it's just very narrowly built on like one person agreeing, or the court itself being able to bring someone into the opinion of the court and get them to buy in based on whatever lever of things or not. And the fact that like the court actually isn't set up apolitically, right? So there's a huge, as we watched, to do about, which party is putting who and who's put on by a conservative or a liberal court, and all these different things. So none of it sits in an apolitical world. We're actually absolutely seeing that right now because the court is looking a little captured. It's a little wild out there. But the long and short of it is that all of the work that we do, all of the things that we care about, all of the issues that we're concerned about, there's typically a law or a policy that impacts that. And those laws and policies are created in a political system. Currently, it's a 2-party system. Those of you who are trying to fight for that third one, don't stop your fight now. You got to really build over time to shift what has always been a 2-party system. But I talk a lot more about politics now, not just because I ran for office, but because, and literally the reason why I ran for office is connected to this, because all of these decisions are created in the political space. And if we're not a part of it, we don't understand it. And when we are complying or pushing against laws, we need to understand how they were created so we understand how to deconstruct them, reconstruct them in ways that actually get to the intended outcomes that we hope. And there's, we talk a lot in the law, there's the spirit of the law and there's the letter of the law. And sometimes people are following the letter of the law, but they've missed the spirit of the law. So, they haven't seen the forest for the trees, and the world is not as great. And so we have to make sure that more people are understanding and engaged in a part of this process, and getting people fired up to do that. Getting people who are like, yeah, like at a 4-day convention, out late, super late, waving US flags, like cheering, chanting, like high energy for that amount of time is incredible. I am planning a conference right now, and it's like, wow, putting together and being able to create the environment that exudes that type of joy and excitement is not an easy feat. And so we'll talk a little bit more about joy in this political campaign as almost like a case study on things that we can take away as leaders. But I want to make sure that we understand sort of some of the science behind emotions and why it matters, so that you're not just like, oh, I was just trying to ride this wave right now. Nah, girl. Nah, bruh. Like, it's not just that. Like, there's so much that we can learn from this. There's so much from marketing, advertising world. There's like all kinds of science. There's psychology of colors. There's like all these things that play in that say, hey, we should pay attention to how people feel, because a lot of us make decisions at the emotional level first, and then we use logic or data or whatever other things to confirm the bias that we've already made, to justify what we're doing. And there's a whole lot of information and language out there about confirmation bias, so I won't really go into it in this conversation. But it's important to know that, one, emotions matter. And when you are trying to lead big, bold change, when you are even small change in your organization or your household, right? Like, tell people that we're going to bed an hour early and see how that works out. Like, anytime you're asking people to change, because most of us are creatures of comfort. And even if we want the outcome, we don't want to go through the process of change. And a whole lot happens in our bodies to like resist change. We have to actually like really fight against ourselves and our quote unquote natural inclination to make the types of changes that are necessary. I think in the medical world, there was like a study where they're like, you can tell someone that if they don't make dietary changes, they'll die. And like, they won't sustain the change. They won't necessarily make the change. That even the threat of mortality is not strong enough by itself to get people to change. You talk about habit and how people change habits or build new habits. Like, there's so much in the process that goes around how people build a new habit, how they stop doing something. And there's an emotional aspect to it. I run a business for a while. Many of you are business owners as well. When the going gets tough, what does everybody say? Go back to your why. Why did you start? Why? Because there's an emotional connection that you have with this really hard thing that you're doing. We talk about talking to people and making an emotional connection with them, because again, regardless of what anybody tells you, we are all affected by our emotions. And the cool thing about that is, again, we watched this convention 4 days, people who weren't even Democrats who tuned in, and folks, everyone kind of being like, I mean, yeah, it looked like it was fun. Like, it looked like people were happy, that folks generally liked each other. Like, families seemed, dare I say, normal and like friendly. Like, oh, we could see how someone loves their dad, or how much Kamala's husband like clearly admires her, or the Obamas. I mean, can we say anything else? Every time they step on stage, it's just kind of like goals. There's like an appreciation. We could see, we could feel these types of things, right? And there's something very powerful about that, because as I started this, emotions are contagious. And as I was looking at and reading and researching about emotions, one of the things that came up that's kind of nerdy, but I love it, is that emotions are literally energy. In fact, you can define emotions as energy in motion, or emotion. It tickles me every single time. But like, there are actual vibrations and energy that is released through our emotions. And you might feel this, understand this for yourself, you know. And there are some emotions that are stronger, more powerful than others. Marketers a lot of times will use what we call FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, to get people to buy. That is actually probably the easiest way to get people to move towards taking an action, is to have them scared, uncertain, or doubtful. And we don't like those feelings, so we often try to ameliorate them very quickly. So if you notice, when you start watching advertisements, even when you're watching these political campaigns, like, how often are they cueing into a fear or an uncertainty or a doubt that you have to get you to do something, right? We often talk about, hey, if you're going to go out there and talk to people, you want to solve problems, you're going to tell them what the problem is and really spend a lot of time in the problem and the feeling of the problem. Because once people tune into that, then they remember they want to get a solution. And it's typically easier to do that with a negative feeling, because we don't want to sit in negative feelings for too long, than a positive emotion. But this campaign has also really cued in on positive emotions at a period in time, I think, when people want to break from the misery. And like I started, emotions are contagious. We have that great saying, misery loves company. And what we're also seeing is, like, joy is infectious. Joy actually happens to be one of the highest vibrating emotions. There's an emotional scale. I'll have to put the link in there so you all can go check it out. But at the top are things like joy and knowledge and empowerment, freedom. How many times have you heard people talking about freedom in this campaign? At the DNC really is talking about freedom and leveraging that, as well as love and appreciation. Those are emotions that have some of the highest vibrations. I will say, very interestingly, also, there's another book. I always looking around because I have books all over my office, so that's what's happening. That talks about, we as humans don't know how to sustain positive emotions for a long time. So sometimes we will basically interject a limiting belief to sort of bring ourselves down from the dopamine rush that happens when we get feeling really good, which is interesting. I actually see that happening with myself more, and have to, like, really be intentional about that. So what that might look like is something really great will happen, and then you'll have, like, a random thought of something horrible or horrific happening that, like, comes out of nowhere. And it's almost like your brain trying to check you from being too happy or elated, which is very interesting. I don't know. I think also we don't really teach ourselves how to enjoy joy and happiness and all those types of things. We spend a lot of time worrying and fretting and being in a constant state of sort of fight or flight. That's not great for our nervous systems also. But I want to make a note about joy, because this is something that we can all take in and use a little bit in our daily lives, is actually sort of finding ways to embrace joy more frequently, personally, as well as in the work that we do. But joy is a present emotion. It is about your feeling right now. And I want to make this distinction, because a lot of times when people talk about, like, if they're happy, hey, are you happy? We think about happiness as a measure over time. And there are a lot of different factors that play into whether we think that we're happy, that don't have anything to do with, like, a current emotion. But joy, boy, it got me out here feeling like Hakeem Jeffries, like, joy, anyway, trying to take us to church. But joy is an emotion that you feel in the moment. It is a very present and grounding emotion. It is euphoria in some ways. And so I invite you to find moments of joy in the hard work that you're doing to change the world, to change yourself, and to find joy in the process. And that doesn't mean that the whole thing will be feeling good and exciting. And I actually think I appreciated that about some of the speeches during the DNC, especially from my forever FLOTUS, Michelle Obama, where she was kind of like, hey, a little bit of sobering, like, there will be lies, there will be negative things, there will be obstacles that come along the way. And we have to keep going still. We can't be fretting and stressing ourselves out and talking ourselves out. And that is a message, that is a word to anybody out here right now who's building a business, who's building a brand, who's building a movement. There will be moments where it feels incredible, where it's like, yes, this is it. We are doing the thing. And then there will be some of the lowest of lows in the process. And all of that is part of the process. And I really say that, stick here, point that out, because too often People give up because they don't know that hardship is part of the process. And we don't have ways to sustain ourselves when things get hard, which is why it's also important to know what brings you joy and find those moments of joy. Have self-care, have a plan, have a community to help you do really tough things, because especially when you are trying to shift culture, when you're trying to change laws, when you're trying to change whole systems, you will at times feel completely alone, completely like an outsider, completely like, this is impossible. Why am I doing this? This is stupid. I should just go along on the wide road with everybody else. They look so happy and peaceful there, or at least, they're not struggling and grappling with the things that we are. And so I encourage you to find joy and to find rest, both as pieces of resistance in this process, in this work that we're doing, and to separate yourself from the reality that you alone are not going to change the whole thing. And you have to have community. Again, going back to capacity and the need. And what's amazing about how this movement is growing beyond just a campaign, like people, this like, we're not going back, like folks of all sorts of denominations, like getting in and getting excited about this has been incredible. Because full disclosure, I was said to my husband, like, I don't know, maybe the democratic tent is too big and it's unmanageable, but like being able to find something that everyone can cue into has been incredible in watching this Harris Walz campaign take off. And I think it's something that we should also be learning and thinking about too. Your issue might be poverty or the unhoused or education inequity. How do you build a tent that's big enough that people can see themselves in it, regardless of, what jersey they wear, R or D or, whatever it is, like how can you build the tent big enough based on that big ideal that brings people in a way that is inclusive, exciting, that people can see themselves in, so we can have whole movements to shift systems that just simply don't serve us. And so, I think, again, with energy, it's good for you. It's important for you to understand your energy, where you're vibrating. There's a really great book, Being is the New Doing, by Radia Rhodes. Put it up there so you can see it a little bit. And she really talks about the energy that we bring to things and the importance of like understanding the energy that you bring to something, especially as leaders, because sometimes our energy creates a self-fulfilling prophecy that we see the rewards. We reap what you sow. So, the energy that you go into it, if you're like, I don't know if this is going to work, I don't know, you might not take the type of effort at the level and speed and intensity that you need to get the outcome. I can tell you I've absolutely done this. I've been like, I'm going to host this thing. And then I'm like, I don't know. So I don't market it full out. I don't talk about it everywhere. I don't show up with the level of excitement. And then nobody shows up. And it's like, oh, see, I knew it was going to work. No, boo. Your energy wasn't right. Like, you didn't walk into this thinking like, it's got to be this. And part of having an understanding and managing change and leadership is understanding your own energy and your own values and your own vision, and really aligning your energy with the things that you're saying you're going to do, and cutting out the stuff that doesn't bring you energy, that doesn't fill you up. And I'm not saying that you're going to always be able to do whatever you want, but in some regards, you might just need to delegate some of the stuff that you don't really need to do, so that you can focus your energy on the stuff that only you can do, or only you can do the way that you need to do. But again, I just want, to think about energy, joy, positive emotions, and figuring out how you build that into the culture of your organization, how you're checking in with yourself as a leader to see what things fill your energy bucket, what things detract from that, and how you can manage that. And also looking at what that looks like for your team and the coalitions that you're building, so that you're not burning out in the process. Because again, the work is serious, it's long, and it's enduring. And it's not something that we can do alone. And it's not something that you can just grit or will power your way through. That's a recipe for burnout. And we don't need any of you burning out, because that vision, that mission, that thing that keeps you up at night, that sparks, that's easy for you to do, we need it to transform the world so that it's better for all of us. Anyway, that's all I've really got about energy, and the DNC kind of being a masterclass in how we can leverage positive energies, not just fear, uncertainty, and doubt, to get people excited to do deep and hard work. Like the fact that they keep getting folks signing up in these record numbers to go knock doors or call people or participate in any of these ways, writing postcards, like all of this stuff is like tough. It's like I said, I ran a campaign. I had to knock on doors. I had to go to events. I had to get on the phone and cold call people and ask them for money, which was also like pretty wild and intense. Like it's not easy labor. It's not easy. And I think that everybody's been pretty honest about there's a large, hard road ahead. And people are excited to be a part of this moment. They're excited to be a part of this movement. They're excited to be a part of that campaign because they figured out how to bring not just, hey, like horrible things could happen if you vote this way, if you agree with certain types of worldview, etc. But it's going to be fun. We're going to laugh while we do really hard things. We're going to turn down for what? We're going to have a good time doing this. We're going to celebrate. We're going to love on each other. We're going to hear hard stories and cry with each other. But we're going to do it together, and we're going to be built and connected around this idea of what a future could look like. And listen, if at any point you're ever trying to do something, count on the future, bet on the future, because it's coming regardless of whether we want to, whether you want to prepare for it or not. So I share that to say, Peter Drucker says it best, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So like build the culture and infuse joy and happiness and other positive emotions in your culture so that it's sustainable for you and the coalition of people that you are leading. If this was helpful for you, please like and subscribe. We drop a new podcast every Sunday evening. And also stay tuned because we are getting ready to launch our Ibani Song Collective, which is a community for disruptive social justice warriors, people who are trying to do big, really hard stuff, to have space and community to grow together, to have access to resources, to make sure that you are building the things that you need, that you have some ideas around the parameters, how we can play with law and policies to make sure that you're building the thing that you need to and you're disrupting where you need to. And so I invite you to keep your eye out to join the waitlist for that. I can't wait to be in community with more of you to do big, disruptive, bold, audacious things. But in the meantime, go lead audaciously.